Bethlehem College and Seminary is still accepting applications for the coming academic year. For more information, visit bcsmn.edu.
And let me just kind of frame what we're doing today, just to remind you. This semester's chapel series is about the glory of God and the common good. So that good way of living together in God's world, that's what we're pursuing. That's what we're trying to think well about. How do we live in this world in such a way that we promote the goodness inherent and found in God's good design? How God has created the world to work. How do we live along its grain? And when Dr. Rigney, President Rigney, introduced our chapel a couple weeks ago, 3 now, he gave 3 prayers, which I kind of think of dreams for this semester. He actually gave 4. One of them's kind of a comprehensive one, but I'm going to share these again. He talked about us through this semester growing in our gratitude for the common good. I think that's a really good one. And what I see these panels and these chapels doing to serve that end is they alert us. They draw our attention to things God is up to in this world. And as God does that, our gratitude for what he's up to expands, doesn't it? How could it not? I think you're going to see and have that effect in your heart today as we hear what God's doing in this city of ours. I think your heart's going to swell with a new and fresh gratitude for the goodness of God's work, the goodness of his promoting our common good. Joe also talked about cultivating the common good. We pray for, we dream about both growing in our appreciation for what God's up to, but also cultivating the common good, engaging in it. Seeing if there's ways that we as a student body can creatively use our energy, use our gifts, use our dispositions to come alongside what God is up to. He gave us this category, Joe did, of these holy ambitions. Maybe this semester would kind of ignite in our student body. I think of you guys like as an incubator, or the school as an incubator, and as you hear what God is up to in the world, as you hear from the Bible, sometimes God kind of stirs something comes alive. Do you ever feel that when the word's preached? Or when somebody presents an idea, your heart kind of swells, you feel it kind of expand. And we're eager for this semester perhaps to have that effect. We're praying that it has that effect on some of you. God's created each of you individually and given you gifts and talents. He's made you very specially. And we're professors here, so we think this is the greatest student body on the planet, at least in Minneapolis in this block. But we're eager to see, look, God's made you in such a way that we're eager to see how might he use you in this grand thing he's doing in our world. How might he want you to be a human being? So we're praying about that and organizing the semester, having talks. So that leads me to today. We've got really an exciting panel before us today. We're going to talk today about the common good related to the unborn, related to, as Garrett prayed, unwanted babies. We're going to talk about caring for the moms who bear these children, people that are in desperate situations. We're going to talk about that. And we've got some experts with us today. We had to hire out for this, okay? So we're excited. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a little bit. I've got Tammy Coker on my left here. Is Coker the way to say it? Okay. Lucy Olson, and then Jonathan Parnell. I've asked them to introduce themselves. They'll say more about what they do and what organizations they're engaged in. But let me just say here at the beginning, we are really glad you're here. I told you when you came in, it's a gift. Your time, your expertise, lending it to us as a student body. We know you got a bunch on your plate. All of them were saying, I got a 2 p.m., I got a 3 p.m. meeting today. They're busy people engaged in all kinds of good, but thank you for lending your time to us. We're an eager and warm audience that is eager to be informed about these things. So let me just briefly pray for them, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to do. God, thank you for these. Thank you for Tammy. Thank you for Lucy. Thank you for Jonathan. We want to be helped by them today. In your providence, you've aligned their lives to cross with ours at this moment, and we're eager to see and experience the benefit of that. So give them grace to communicate to us. Give us grace as a student body to listen and engage and wonder how might we participate in what you're doing. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, here at the beginning, kind of introductions and inspirations. I've asked them each to introduce themselves, tell us what organization or what kind of ministry they're engaged in. And I said, it would be really nice if they could share a story, kind of sketch a narrative of what inspired them to engage in foster care or crisis pregnancy work or adoption. So hopefully you've come and thought about a story. Feel free to go in any order. If you want to go first, I'm not going to point at each of you, but if you want to start, tell us who you are, introduce yourselves to our student body.
I'll start. So again, my name is Tammy Coker, and I work with New Life Family Services. Quickly, New Life has 3 programs. We are a licensed adoption agency. Second, we have 5 pregnancy centers called First Care, serving those facing an unplanned pregnancy. And our third program is our Conquerors Abortion Recovery Program for those who are hurting from a past abortion. I became a Christian my junior year of high school, and God started to change my heart towards all these things. So towards Him, towards life, I became pro-life, although I would say I didn't really understand what that meant at that time. Fast forward to 21 years ago, I was married, had 2 little kids. I started a job at New Life. I was a Christian, I was pro-life, sounded great. I had no idea really what I was getting into. And almost immediately, as I began to meet with women faced with crisis pregnancies, my eyes were opened, and I realized the challenges that women are facing in the midst of this pregnancy and the courage that it takes to continue a pregnancy when everything around them is telling them abortion is the easy solution. I got to meet birth mothers who made just incredible, sacrificial, loving decisions to place their children, who they grew for 9 months, with these families that they chose. I met adoptive families who were struggling with infertility, and they wanted nothing more than to have a baby. And I met on the other side women who had experienced abortion and were reeling with that decision and struggling even sometimes 20 years later. And my eyes were opened, and I fell, and I'm getting emotional, didn't expect that. I truly just fell in love with the ministry, and it's such a privilege to be a part of what God is doing and getting to see lives transformed and changed every single day. So very grateful for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm Lucy Olson. Is this on?
I think so.
Okay. I'm Lucy Olson, and I am here representing Together for Good. We're a Christian ministry in the Twin Cities, and we provide crisis care for children when parents need that. So we get calls every day from all over the city, interestingly, really mostly from the secular social service agencies, so from nurses, doctors at hospitals, prison social workers, all over the city if parents say, I can't care for my children right now. And then we have a process of recruiting Christian families from churches who we train similar to the process of becoming approved for foster care, but to care for children in their own homes whose moms need that voluntarily. And then we also provide for those moms an advocate who's really a prayer partner and friend for them. And I think you asked for a story. I'll just share how I'm the Twin Cities director, and how I ended up in this role. About a year and a half ago, there was a girl that I had developed a friendship with who came to me and said she had an abortion scheduled, and she said, I don't have a choice. I can't parent right now, this baby, I don't have a choice. And I thought that was ironic language. And I said, I want you to feel like you have real choices. I want you to know you do have a choice. And so I said, if you really can't parent, we will find a family. And I did bring her to one of the New Life pregnancy centers, but she ended up choosing to parent. She didn't place the baby for adoption. And I said, if you cancel this appointment, if you have this baby, my husband and I will be your family. Her parents were deceased. She didn't have support. I said, we will be your family. We will be this baby's grandparents. We will be your people. She didn't have people. And then I called Together for Good because I said, how do you do that? How do you become a family for someone that you don't know? What do you need to have in place to care for a child safely in your home? What if there's an emergency? So I called the president of the organization, and at the end of that conversation, had my current job. So that's how I came to the organization. But what I've loved about it is we have walked alongside that mom and that child who we have taken in as our surrogate grandchild for a year, and in my role, I'm helping hundreds of families do the same. So I think, it's an important path. There are kind of three options for a woman who's pregnant and feels that she can't parent, and one is an abortion and one is an adoption, and then the path that most choose is to parent. So how do the people of God come around those moms and support that decision for the rest of their life, not just in that moment? So that's what we're doing at Together for Good, is how do we come around those families and become a family to the lonely. I mean, daily, we have people call and say, I don't have anyone. And we say, you don't have people, but Jesus has people. We are his people, and we want to be your family. So that's what we're doing.
Hey, let me say one thing, Jonathan, before you jump in. Lucy used the language of adopting the mom when we were talking in the lobby. I thought that was a helpful kind of picture. We don't think of that, do we? Adoption, we're thinking of the kiddo. And Lucy says, look, what's often needed is we need to adopt the mom and take care of her. So that's beautiful. All right, Jonathan, you're up.
Well, happy to be here. I'm a lead pastor at Cities Church in St. Paul, and I think my passion for loving my unborn neighbors really started when I could vote. I mean, it was when I was 18, and that also coalesced with when I began to take my faith more seriously, and God was working in my life, and became more involved just in the issue, learning more about it. A lot of it's just knowledge. Learning about groups like Abort 73, which is a great website, resource ministry. It's been around for several years. And then when I was actually here as an MDiv student, 2008, 2012, so my wife, she really could be here and say much more than me. She's had a passion for endangered children for a very long time. Part of it comes from just what God's done in her life and her story. But so she's always had this passion. And then being around other Christian families, and you see it becomes more plausible. You begin to see people caring for endangered children through foster care and adoption. And so that kind of plants a seed. And then I remember, though, when I was an MDiv student here, actually I was studying one day at the Caribou down Washington. So this way, so the Caribou down Washington. And reading my Bible. And this is, for me, just a moment, I remember it, and it stands out, and I made a highlight in my Bible, and it's still there. So, but from Psalm 10, I was reading Psalm 10, and the context of Psalm 10 is David's talking about the wicked and their oppression, and how the schemes of the wicked, how they're just steamrolling the vulnerable. And he says in verse 16, I read these three verses, Psalm 10, verse 16, he says, Yahweh is king forever and ever. The nations perish from his land. O Yahweh, you hear the desire of the afflicted. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear to do justice to the fatherless and the oppressed, so that man who is of the earth may strike terror no more. And as I read that, because you will do justice to the fatherless and the oppressed. And the question just was how? Like, how will God strengthen their heart? How will God hear their cry? How will he do justice for the fatherless and the oppressed? And the answer is through his people. Like, that's how he does it. He does it through his people. He does it through organizations like Together for Good and New Life Family Services. And that was where I in the sense, things kind of came together, and it's like, oh, this is so we're going to do this. Like, my family's going to walk down this path, and we're going to be a means that God would use to do exactly what he says he's going to do in Psalm 10. And so that was when we began to walk down that road, but then it was my wife who really grabbed the steering wheel and really tried to. It's not as easy as you might think. I think as we share our story together, she says, I thought, oh yeah, we just want to tell some people, hey, we want to do, we want to care for endangered children, and we just imagine like the red carpet's going to just, roll out. You're going to have all these opportunities. She had to bang down some doors to kind of get where we did a foster care through Ramsey County, and it took some time, but she really led that, and that's how we led to fostering 2 children that we've since adopted. So.
That's a great text. Thanks for sharing that with us. So Write that down, Psalm 10. That's a good place to go, a little anchor text. What we're talking about today, you see God's heart right there, don't you? So, really good. Thank you. I love how engaged you are in the work you're doing. God sees that. It's sweet to see your heart coming through. I'm sure we'll get more of that as we talk. So one of the things I wanted to make sure we did is understand, inspired by their stories, yes, but also understand the kind of work that these folks are engaged in. So I gave them a few questions. I gave them a heads up on these questions, and they've been kind of noodling on them. So I'm going to just tick through them. We'll see how many we get. We won't stop here. This is kind of an information section of the panel, okay? So they're going to just maybe rapid fire, maybe not. We'll see how it goes. I'll tick through these. If somebody wants to take the lead on answering them, and maybe one or two of you want to say, oh, yeah, and this and that, and feel very free. It doesn't all have to come back this way. So let's start with this. We hear the language of a crisis pregnancy center. We're sympathetic but an uninformed audience. What's a crisis pregnancy center do? Kind of lay out the fullness of what that kind of work is.
Sure, well, I can probably take this one.
Tammy's going to be elected. All right, go for it.
This is what we do. So there are crisis pregnancy centers. We don't actually use that term. I prefer just pregnancy centers, and actually I'm even thinking of dropping that name, but just because of the political rhetoric that's happening right now against pregnancy centers. But essentially, we are life-affirming organizations that support women facing unplanned pregnancies. Our pregnancy centers are a little bit broader than a lot of centers. We're pretty holistic in what we do and comprehensive in what we do, but just a quick snapshot of the services we provide is we do pregnancy testing, we do ultrasounds, we have licensed social workers on staff, obviously registered nurses on staff that meet with clients, kind of where they at, assessing their situation, what are the barriers if they're considering abortion. You know, I loved what you said about she felt like she had no choice. The majority of women that we see that are considering abortion, it is not because they have measured all their decisions and decided, oh, this is the best choice for me. It's truly because they feel like they have no other choice. And we want to make sure that women do know they have three choices, that abortion by default is not the answer. And so coming alongside and saying, you know, what are the barriers that you're facing and how can we help address those? And so we also do other things we do. So we have licensed social workers that meet and we'll do the decision-making counseling with them. We do free comprehensive STI testing and treatment for anybody who walks through our doors. And then our largest program is actually our Every Family Parenting program, where we walk alongside clients. And so for our organization, we will serve them in this program from, you know, as soon as they find out they're pregnant until their youngest child is age 5. So we're really in it for the long haul with them. We want to walk alongside them. Many, and I know you'll hear this from Lucy, but you know, many don't have the resources or understand like how to be a good parent. They've never seen good parenting modeled, and so how can we come alongside for the long haul with them? Because the people that, you know, are considering abortion, they're facing really hard situations. Some of them are homeless. I mean, we see homeless women all the time that come in and they're living in their car with their 2 little kids and they're pregnant again. You know, those are real situations that you can't just give a pat answer, right? You need to walk with them in the muck and the mire and really walk with them through it. I love just like that example that you shared. So I would say in a nutshell, that's kind of what pregnancy centers are.
And you said 5? Is that the...
So we have 4 3/4.
Okay.
So we have 4 centers, 3 in the Twin Cities, 1 in Rochester, and then we are opening a brand new clinic right in the heart of urban Minneapolis, not too far from here in the Phillips community on Chicago and Franklin. The building is built, we have our certificate of occupancy, and we are desperate for staff. We are hurting to hire all the staff that we need to open.
Okay. That was kind of a follow-up I had. 5 centers, that amount of different work you're engaged in, how many people are we talking about engaged in these 5 centers? Employees?
Clients? Oh, yeah. Employees. Yeah. Employees, I think we have 37 employees right now.
Okay.
And we probably serve about 6,000 men, women, and children every year through our centers.
Okay. All right, that's super helpful. Anything to add to crisis pregnancy centers? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about foster care. What's foster care? Maybe at the same time, the question I think what we often have is fostering a road to adoption? Is that kind of like the way we should be thinking of it? Sketch that out for us. any of you talk to about?
Yeah, so the word that I like to use, I wonder what y'all think about this, is foster care really is about caring for endangered children. And I think the phrase endangered children, I like that, because we're not talking about orphans in this case. We're talking about children who are in danger. And when it comes to foster care, like I did through Ramsey County, it's children who are in such danger that the state has determined it's unsafe for this child to continue living in this home. And so then there are people who go through different process to be certified to care for these children for typically a temporary amount of time until that parent or those parents are stable enough to receive the children back into their home. So what would you say, Lucy?
Yeah, and do you want to speak to, is it a path to adoption?
As a path to adoption, sometimes it is. So when you take a foster child in, there's always the possibility that the parents' rights will be terminated. And this can get really complicated when we're talking about the state and how this goes. But the state can terminate a parent's rights. Usually they try to get the parent to do that, terminate their own rights to have custody of their children. And in that case, the child will go into permanent placement. And so then the foster parent, if there's not a next of kin, the foster family becomes like next of kin and would have the first opportunity to adopt that child. In our story, our first two, we were certified, we were ready to go. Our first two foster placements, both were infants. We brought them home from the hospital, and both ended up having the parental rights were terminated. And so they both moved into permanent placement. However, that doesn't usually happen. Usually you have a child for a couple months, maybe a few weeks, maybe a year, an average a year. So you should speak more about. So I'd say if you're interested in it, talk to as many people who have experience as possible, because everyone's story is different. And at our church, another pastor family, they've also done foster to adopt. And as it turns out, their first two foster placements, they also adopted those two kids. So we have an extremely rare situation in our church as an example. So we always try to tell people it usually doesn't go that way. So why don't you, Lucy?
Yeah, I can chime in on it too. So foster care, there's two kinds of foster care. One is through the government, and that's what you did through the county, and that is involuntary. So a mom can't voluntarily place her child in the foster care system unless she abandons them at a fire station or a hospital, and that's because it's so expensive. So it's about $40,000 a year to have one child in foster care, and that cost is to the government. And then the other type of foster care would be what they do at New Life, which is voluntary, which is if a mom is, in their case, trying to decide if she wants to place a baby for adoption, they can do a volunteer foster care placement temporarily. And then what we do with crisis care for children and respite care for children is voluntary. So the mom chooses to place her children in the care of another family for them to be safe while she is getting help. So we do, as I mentioned, children of incarcerated parents and parents who are in recovery for addiction or hospitalized. And most of the calls that come, we get about 30 or 40 calls a week, come because a mom is in an acute crisis. So she's at the emergency room, or she's been arrested, or she's going to treatment. And so that initial placement with a Christian family for us is usually because there's some kind of emergency. But then what we try to do is then walk alongside her. So build a relationship even with a few Christian families that want to be in her life in an ongoing way, really, which we feel is the path of discipleship. And so then we set up ongoing care for her where she can have a break, she can build a relationship with a family, and we try to partner her with a mentor as well. So most of the moms come to us in crisis, but we don't want it just to be a one-time encounter. We want to then continue to be in their life. So
that's so helpful. What a beautiful picture, too. You know, when we were out in the lobby, you talked about a family whose situation was awfully different from Jonathan's, where they fostered a bunch of different kiddos. Could you talk about that? And just he's right. It's a little anomalous to kind of be able to adopt the first two you foster. So
yeah, and I think one thing to know is that it is extremely rare that a child is placed in foster care through the government. The bar is so high, so the child has to be in. They have to demonstrate in court that there is a likelihood of a potentially fatal injury to the child, basically, or egregious abuse. Usually that would be sexual abuse. So really it doesn't happen for neglect, very rarely. So it's very difficult to have a child placed in foster care, and it is a tiny percentage of children who are in unsafe situations that go into foster care. And then I think 85% of the time, at the end of 9 to 12 months, they are returned to their biological parents. So the other 15% of the time, most of those are then placed with relatives who adopt them, and only a tiny handful end up being adopted by their foster parents. So that gives you a little sense of the scale.
I can even wonder, are the families engaged in foster care or walking alongside the birth moms, are there people who are caring for those Christians? Because, man, they're really giving it, aren't they? And I can imagine they need to be refreshed. Do you see or think about that kind of thing? I don't know, maybe at cities or, Lucy, talk to it.
So what our model is that we are primarily coaching leaders at churches to come alongside families in their congregation that want to care for women in this situation. So we look at every church to recruit potentially 2 ministry coordinators, and their job is supporting the Christian families in the church that are walking alongside the mom. So with meals, with help with transportation, or with their own kids if they're hosting other people's children. And in many of the churches we work with, they are also caring for the foster families in the church. So trying to raise up a network of support for families that want to do this, because it is extremely personally costly to bring other people into your home and into your family. So that kind of is our model, is that we want to be in the background. We don't want our organization to be front and center. We want to mobilize and equip churches to lead in this area and to set that example for the world that is watching.
It's beautiful, like a triage nurse almost saying, all right, we got a church to get involved here.
Right. Well, when we get a call, we look at the map and look at where's the closest church to this mom's house.
Yeah, okay.
And then we call the families that have volunteered from that church, with the hope that she could be plugged into that church family. Our end goal is not just to raise up, we call them host families who are caring for the children, but to plug her into a church family.
That's good. Tammy, maybe talk a little bit about how churches come alongside of New Life, and how do you engage with the church community?
Sure. So we probably have about 100 churches that are engaged with us in a variety of different ways. So certainly we have churches that support us financially, things like that. We offer some training and education for churches, typically around the topic of adoption. And we have pastors that volunteer in our centers. So one of the challenges is the men that come into our centers. We don't have, we have one male on staff, and he doesn't work in our centers. So it's mostly women. So in the past, we've had a couple of pastors who would come and work at one of our centers for the day, so that they're doing their own work, they're bringing their laptop, but then if a man comes in, maybe with his girlfriend who's pregnant, things like that, he will kind of take the lead on that appointment, obviously being trained, things like that. But I mean, we rely on churches, for a lot of different things, but we also want to be giving to our churches. So certainly, anything we can do to partner with what churches are already doing. What I love about the church, we can do what we do, and I feel like we are, really kind of the experts in dealing with the crisis in the moment, but what we can't do is discipleship. And so we do have the opportunity to share the gospel with our clients at times. We do have the opportunity to pray with them, but our goal, much like your goal, is how can we then hand them off in a friendly way to a church that's going to really come around and support them. Life decisions need support. That's a line I like to use often, and so the church is a big way that we can do that, is connecting.
Maybe talk a little bit about cities. You're on the other end of this kind of relationship. How do you guys engage?
Yeah, I mean, a big piece of it really is awareness, is getting the needs in front of our people. I mentioned earlier, I'm convinced that most humans, this is we're all totally depraved, but we're not depraved totally. There's a sense of, there's a common grace. Like, usually humans, they're drawn toward like puppies and babies, right? So what I mean is, imagine like if you're walking down the sidewalk and you hear like a cry, and you look, and in the bushes there's a a 6-month-old infant just laying there with nobody to help them. Most people are not going to keep walking. You're going to be drawn. You're going to get that baby. You're going to help, right? And the reality is there are children like that all across these cities. It's just that we don't walk down those sidewalks, right? And so what Tammy and Lucy, what they do is they're on the front lines. They're on those sidewalks all day long. Like you could tell us stories right now. They just were talking about a situation before we came in here. They see that stuff all day long. Most of us, we have no idea. We don't walk down those sidewalks. And so the first thing I want our people to do is, hey, choose to walk down that sidewalk. Go down that path. See the needs. Hear the numbers. See the children who literally are just desperate for care. The families, the mothers who need help. And when you begin to see that, I think that puts things in perspective. And that's where we become mobilized to do something.
Super helpful. Did you want to sketch out, you talked briefly, not Kevin DeYoung, Greg Gilbert style, but church, individual Christian engagement in this. I think you sort of hinted at it with that idea of informing.
Yeah. So when I teach on the mission of the church and try to distinguish between the mission of individual Christians and then the mission of the church corporate, my go-to example is foster care and adoption, because the church corporate can't foster a child or adopt a child. Individual Christian families have to do that. And so what we want to do as a church is part of our discipleship is we're making disciples who care about endangered children and who want to foster and who want to adopt. And so what the church does, as Lucy is saying, is we want to come alongside families who are doing this as support. And that was a big piece of our foster experience, is that we had our first placement and we had lots of meals and people came. And our social worker comes by to visit, and she sees all this food in our house, and she's blown away by the support. And it's like, yeah, this is the church. This is what we do for each other. And that's a big piece. So I'd say individual Christian families do the fostering and the adoption work, and it's the church that wants to make disciples who can, in being disciples, do those things, and then support those disciples as they're taking those steps toward caring for endangered children.
It's very helpful. Couple more questions, and we're gonna kind of move to a concluding type of observation. I wonder, as you think about the line of work you're in, kind of look into the future. I know you're not prophetesses or prophets, maybe you are, and I just didn't know that. You look into the future. What challenges, what kind of things do you see on the immediate horizon that you say, oh, I want you guys to know about this. It's going to be a challenging thing for this type of social good. Or, at the same time, if you want to share, boy, we see a real opportunity. You got a 5th center opening up right in the city. That feels like that fits into that category. Sketch out maybe a challenge, maybe something that you're hopeful about, too.
Let me go first. Well, one of the challenges the pregnancy centers are facing right now is since the reversal of Roe v. Wade, if you've heard of Jane's Revenge, hashtag Jane's Revenge, they are targeting pregnancy centers like ours with all kinds of crazy things. There have been firebombs, there have been graffiti and broken windows, some in Minnesota. We have not experienced the worst of that, but we did have ridiculous posters plastered all over the Phillips community calling us a fake clinic, which, by the way, if we were a fake clinic, it'd be a lot easier to hire staff. I'm just saying, right? I can just do the ultrasounds then, But, it's just calling us, saying that we're trying to, pressure women, forced birth, things like that, which is just not true, categorically not true. So that's one of the challenges. Our Attorney General put out a consumer alert against pregnancy centers. Again, all kinds of lies in there saying we don't have medical professionals on staff, things like that. There's a lot of political garbage that comes alongside this. We are not a political organization. We are the hands and feet of Jesus serving people in need, and that will never change. But that is a challenge. There have been articles written, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's a huge challenge for not just our center, but a lot of centers. And just safety is a concern for that. So that's one thing. I think staffing for us is a huge challenge. Getting our Phillips Community building open is been an 11-year journey, if you can believe that. And But it's exciting, and we know that God has called us here, and we trust that he's going to provide what we need there. The opportunities, I think, for us in particular with pregnancy centers is now that Roe has been reversed, the abortion issue goes back to the states. Minnesota has protected it and actually has rolled back some of the restrictions we used to have. There used to be a 24-hour waiting period. Parental notification was required for an abortion for a minor. That is no longer the case. Abortions no longer have to be done in the hospital after the first trimester, and there's not a physician requirement to do abortions in Minnesota anymore. So I think it's crazy. I think we're going to see a lot more abortions in our state, and I think from the surrounding states, we're going to see more people coming to Minnesota because abortion is protected, unlike some of the other states. So I think there's opportunity with that to really be able to serve more and more people. Since this summer, or actually this year, our client numbers have increased greatly, and our ultrasounds are up 45% this year. So we're excited about the opportunity to serve more people, but the reality is there's going to be more and more people seeking abortion, and that just means we need more people to come alongside and support them. So,
Lucy, why don't you share on these?
Sure, I'll speak to the opportunity. I was, the day after Roe v. Wade was overturned, I was watching some of the press coverage, and I saw one of the attorneys general in one of the southern states interviewed who was very supportive of this decision by the court. And the CBS commentator asked her, as a believer herself, who was very supportive of the pro-life cause, he said, well, what are you in your state going to do now for the women that are unable to access abortion in Arkansas? And she just froze and kind of just stumbled, and I just wanted to jump into the TV because I felt like there is a path for believers. And like Jonathan said, you may not encounter them every day, but we can't handle the volume of calls that we're getting. I feel like the opportunity is that the country has turned its eyes now on Christians who've supported this pro-life cause for a long time to say, what are you going to do now about the children that are born and about the women who are having children that maybe they wouldn't have had without the overturning of Roe v. Wade? What are you going to do? So the eyes are on the church, and I feel like that is an opportunity for the people of God to set the pace, to lead in this. So we do have a path. We have people calling us. We want to mobilize Christians and families. So I think it's a great opportunity.
So good. Thank you. Jonathan.
Yeah, I'd want to add to that, and I try to say this anytime I talk about caring for endangered children. I do believe there's amazing opportunity, but also feel like I need to give a word of caution for folks who decide to walk down this pathway and to be involved in this kind of work. It's dangerous in the sense that Satan hates children. He hates them. He's always hated them. We see in the Bible, right? Children are always getting caught in the crossfire. He hates children, and he hates people who care for children. And when you begin to put yourself in this type of work, spiritual warfare becomes a reality. My family experienced that because, again, you're on the front lines of this is a cosmic battle between good and evil. I mean, there are principalities and powers that are at work in all of this stuff, and I know you see it. There's real evil in the world, is what I'm saying. And you look it in the face when you get involved in this kind of stuff. And so if you want a comfortable life, if you want an easy life, don't get involved with caring for endangered children, okay? I just want to say that as a word of caution. Spiritual warfare is real, and you're going to experience it when you begin to do this. But is Jesus stronger?
Yeah,
is he better?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Does he meet you? Absolutely. Is he there in the crisis? Absolutely. And he's worth it. So I also got to say that.
Can I piggyback on that? We get a question frequently from the secular world, from social workers, who would do this without pay? without money. Like, why would any family do this? Because it is very costly. And it is a chance for us to say over and over, people who have encountered the risen Christ will do things that no other fool would do.
I want to quote you on that. That's good. To whom much has been given, really wonderful. All right, let's end with this. We've got a group full of students, faculty, staff. They're sitting out here, they're listening to this. If they're like me, we think, all right, my heart's swelling. What's like a little step I can take? Can't climb that mountain today of solving the staffing issue. I wish I could. We can pray about it. Maybe that's the step. Why don't you, each of you, share what's one step these folks looking at you, they can take, just a little one, to kind of come alongside of this good you're doing and play their part. Anybody, just fire it out.
I say talk to these two.
Yeah, go ahead.
Share. Yeah.
I think pray about starting a group at your church. I mean, if not now, then down the road, or talking to the leadership at your church about organizing yourselves so that when we get a call that is proximate to your church, we have someone to call. So that we have someone at your church to call and say, we just had a call from a mom that lives in your neighborhood, so that we're not sending her way out to the western suburbs to a church. We want it to be a family. So think about maybe starting this where you are.
And I would say, just on a personal note, maybe start thinking through now what you will do if and when somebody comes to you with an unexpected pregnancy. How can you come alongside and love and support them? Where are you going to go? Do you know where to take them? Because if you haven't experienced that yet, you certainly will. And so having a heart of compassion and love and care and not judgment, I think, is really important. And so I think, come visit one of our centers, take a tour, so that you know and you're informed of how to support people.
It's really good. You heard those. Talk to these ladies. That's what Parnell said. It's good. Have them back. Maybe we'll have you back. Start a group. Get somebody at your church who can be a coordinator for this, so that map of churches that they've got isn't sparsely populated in Minnesota, but at every place, at every corner, we've got a church that we can send people to. And have an answer ready. Have an answer ready when somebody comes to you and says, what do I do? I'm in a bad spot. And so you're not like this attorney general, bless her heart, but you've got to have an answer for that kind of thing. So, yeah, thank you very much. I feel like let's give these folks a round of applause, please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know this. God sees what you're doing. So you're laboring and you're in a difficult place. God sees you. He cares about you. So I want to pray for you. I want you to be refreshed by the Lord. So God, would you please watch over Tammy, watch over Lucy, give grace to Jonathan. I pray that they would sense the truth that greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. Jesus, you embarrassed the devil at the cross. You led him in triumphal procession. There is no power over which you don't claim authority and superiority. And I pray that that reality would be experienced in the lives of these dear brothers and sisters. So, God, would you encourage them, raise up an army of people just like them, maybe from this room. We want to be people engaged in all of the good works that you've prepared in Christ for us to do. So we commend these folks to you and thank you for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
This presentation was made possible by the generous contributors to the Serious Joy Scholarship, permitting our graduates to launch into life and ministry without a burden of student loan debt.